going on, my home studio addicts? Joel and Sandy here today with a video on a typical vocal chain. So, I get a lot of questions about vocals, and while this video might not be a good video to teach you, compression and EQ techniques, this video is going to show you how I generally set up my vocal chains and what plugins come first and last and that sort of thing. So I have a mix up here, and we have one of the chorus vocal parts. And as you can see over here, I have a ton of plugins on my vocals, and I really like to go crazy with plugins on vocals because they're just such an important part of the mix. So I spend a lot of time on these. And I actually think vocals are one of my strengths when mixing. Drums, I'm probably the best at, but vocals is a close second here. So the things that I do with vocals, I've learned from a lot of pro engineers and in courses that I've invested in. So let's jump right into the chain. When you're working on a vocal, the first thing you need in your chain, if you use it, is your pitch correction. You want your vocal to hit the pitch correction before you have any effects or any other plugins on the track. Now, I use Melodyne, but you can use whatever you want. I think Melodyne's probably the best and the most transparent if you're trying to get really transparent pitch correction, but I think Logic has its own. There is Autotune that you could use, and the Waves tune as well. Okay, so now let's get into the more important stuff, which is all these other plugins down here. Now I'm just going to play this one little part here and bypass all these plugins as it's playing, and you're going to notice a dramatic difference. Save our now, there is a huge difference in volume there, but there's also a huge difference in tone. And the important thing to note here is I don't go crazy with any one plugin. It's really all these plugins adding up to make this drastic change. So after everything's pitched correctly and I've tuned everything, the first plugin I usually add is a EQ to subtract the frequencies I don't like. And for that, I use this Pro Q2. So I like to use a graphical EQ that you can get real narrow cuts with so that we can just take out any frequencies that we're not liking. Now, the most important thing here is the low end roll off, because we want to really get rid of anything that we don't want compressed. So we're going to be throwing a compressor in here, and we don't want any low end here that the compressor is going to be working on that's not needed. So that's my main tip for this subtractive EQ, is make sure you get all your low end rolled off. Now, next, I like to move to some more EQ, but this is additive EQ now. So I will typically throw in one of these SSL channels for any frequencies that I like to boost. Now, this plugin's great because I will usually take advantage of the gate in this case to make sure there's no background noise in the empty spaces. And then it also has a compressor, so I'll typically do a little bit of compression with this channel strip, but it's not going to be my main heavy-handed compressor. Next is going to be my main compressor, which will be the CLA 76 9 times out of 10. This compressor is great on vocals, very fast release times if you need them, and I'll usually just set it medium attack, pretty fast release down here. And with this compressor, I'm usually just smashing this vocal, so we're usually getting a ton of gain reduction. Save our now. Yeah, don't be afraid to really compress your vocals. I have videos out there on that. I think that's definitely key, and it's why my vocals sound so good most of the time. Next, I like to throw in Virtual Mix Rack, and this plugin can have any number of little plugins in there. In this case, I'm just using the Revival, but sometimes I'll throw in an extra compressor here. Sometimes I won't. This Revival plugin is key for vocals because it gets a lot of the top end air. And if your vocal's sounding too thin, this thickness knob on the bottom is great for filling a little bit of that in. Next comes my de-esser, and you can use any number of plugins for this. I tend to go with this Eosis de-esser from Slate, but you can use whatever you want. De-essing is super important, especially recording digitally. We get very harsh S's, at least I do when I record. And again, I'm very heavy-handed with this. This is a type of compression here. A de-esser is just basically a multi-band compressor with one band. So I get a lot of gain reduction with this de-esser here, making sure to keep those S's very controlled. Next, I have a multi-band compressor, and I showed this in one of my videos for 4 tips for a controlled vocal. Maybe I'll put that little tag up in the corner. But yeah, this is my little trick for controlling the low end on the vocals, and you guys can check that video out as well. Again, there's a lot of little things, little techniques here that don't seem to make a huge difference, but all added up, all these plugins make for a great sounding vocal. So next we have my limiter, and I put this at the end of all my vocals, and this just shaves off the peaks. Vocals, as you can see, we don't have a lot of peaks here, and we want to make sure and shave any of those little points off. As you can see, this vocal is already very controlled. Maybe at home, your vocals have a lot of peaks and valleys. Well, that's not a good thing. You don't want it to end up like that. That's why we use all this compression and limiting. And lastly, I like to add some sort of saturation to my vocals. You don't have to do this. So I have the Devil Lock on here with a tiny bit of saturation. Sometimes I put the tape machine on vocals. Sometimes I'll use the Devil Lock. But what I like to do is always put a bit more saturation on the chorus vocal than on the verses and other parts of the song, because I just feel like it makes the chorus that much more exciting and powerful. And lastly, below all the plugins are just some of the effect sends. And in my template, I start out with just my standard sends. So I'll have a bunch of delays, a bunch of reverbs, a slap delay, a vocal doubler, and I'll just, these will already be in my template, so I'll just decide when I'm mixing which sends I want this vocal to go to, what effects do I want to have on it, and that's basically it. Guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to download your free Ultimate Home Studio Mix Guide. I made this for you guys so you could start getting your mixes sounding better. There's a lot of great information in there. And be sure to reach out if you have any questions or if you need any help with your mixes. Thanks.